Hello and welcome back to the Brit Iron podcast. Today is episode 19 of our season preview and individual team run-through. It is of course the 19th ranked team today, and that is the Carolina Panthers. And of course, joined by my good mates Matt and Sam today. How you doing today, boys?
Good, mate.
Pretty good.
Played a day's worth of golf, hit the range, went and played 9 up at Bill and Bear, one of our local courses, so we're ready to get into some football.
Just to mention, I'm 7-0 against Sam currently, but we'll move on. I'll save him the embarrassment.
Today's round was not representative. Like, the score was not representative of what actually happened on the course.
Winners win, mate. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Doesn't sound like a good day for you, Sam. But anyway, the Panthers. We'll get back onto topic here. The first question I'd like to kick it off with is a simple one: is Teddy Bridgewater good enough to be the face of this franchise?
I don't think he needs to be the face of the franchise, if you know what I mean. I think he's good enough to be the quarterback, and for what they're paying him, I think it's a great deal. It's kind of that sweet spot at the moment for quarterbacks where you're not paying him stupid money like some of the other teams out there that are paying 30 plus million for like the star guy, because he's not really proven himself to be a star guy. But you're paying him decent money to come in, and crucially, he's not going to turn the ball over, and he'll complete balls on the important third downs. The real identity of this team and the face of the franchise is Christian McCaffrey. Yeah. So Bridgewater doesn't need to be the face of the franchise. Yeah. He just needs to rock up and do a job.
Yeah, I agree. I think he just needs to be a game manager there, and just keep the offense efficient, not be throwing the ball away, just keep him on the field, and yeah, pretty much sort of let CMC do the rest.
So staying on the CMC front then, do you guys reckon he's going to get similar workload to the previous 2 seasons?
It's hard to say.
I think you will see a bit of a fall off with McCaffrey, just because Norv Turner, who was the OC there for the last couple of years, is a guy who is known to dial into kind of one running back and just feed the ball through that guy. And to be honest, from a Carolina standpoint, if I'm the GM there and I'm the OC, the amount of money I've just paid Christian McCaffrey, I don't necessarily want to give him the ball 400 times in a season. I want to maximise his playmaking ability whilst also keeping the tyres as fresh as possible, because this window that you've got with a generational player, I want to maximise his career. I don't want to give him 400 carries a season if I can avoid it. And I think with an emerging young wide receiver core there, I don't think they're necessarily going to have to rely on him as much. I think they've got some great options at wide receiver, so maybe they can afford to give McCaffrey's touches, ease off the gas a bit, and I think he'll still have this similar production and efficiency on those carries. I think they just might have to rely on him a bit less, which is great for McCaffrey, and it's great for the Panthers.
Yeah, I'll 100% back that. I think just looking at the names of some of the wide receivers they've got there, see DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, Curtis Samuel, to name just a few. And I think that as a 3 is a decent core within the NFL. I think my one slight concern, and it does sort of play into how effective CMC will be in a few of these names, there's obviously limited off-season. It's coming out and it's looking like it's going to be an even more limited pre-season of currently maybe 2 games. There's even talk of it being 1 or even none. Like, it's really up in the air at the moment. You've got a new offensive coordinator, a new quarterback. Robbie Anderson is a new big name sort of wide receiver coming in. There's a lot of new elements to this offense, and they're going to have a limited time to click. So it's a slight concern for me that, and I think I've kind of reflected it in my sort of rankings and my wins-losses for them, that I've got them being much better at the end of the season compared to the start. They've also got a defense that was relatively gutted in this offseason with people leaving. However, in the draft, they were defense heavy. And I think it's going to take some time for those guys to play their way into the league. So I think early, I kind of tempering my expectations around what we'll see. But down the stretch, I think they're sort of making some moves, and especially in a very tough division. I think they're kind of doing what they need to, but I think we're talking about at this point, because it's still, I think for them, a year off being able to fully compete in the division, because I think the offense is there. Once it clicks, I think the defense is going to be exposed at points, just because it's quite young against a lot of experienced quarterbacks in that league, in that division.
Yeah, it does certainly seem like they're sort of in a rebuild mode at the moment, from what I can see. Would you agree with that, Sam?
I wouldn't actually, because I think they're, especially with where we're getting to in our rankings now, we're kind of at that point where we're pressing. These are all teams that, for use of a less cliched term or whatever, they're going to be, this time in December, they're probably going to be in the hunt. The teams that are on the verge of that wild card round. And I think there's a couple of players here that could really have big breakout years. I mean, you've already mentioned the wide receiver core. I think that the addition of Robbie Anderson is going to be great for DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel. DJ Moore especially, I look to being a massive breakout, kind of establish himself as one of the better receivers in the NFL, which with the quarterback they have is brilliant, because you've got these young, fast guys who Teddy Bridgewater's not necessarily going to drive the ball downfield, and he's got players around him who he can dump off for a 10-yard pass, who can then take it 60 to the house, which is brilliant for them. They've got a lot of young playmakers. But I'm looking at their defense, and I think, as Matt said, they've got a lot of players who could potentially work into the later half of the season. Their second-round pick, Grossmatos, who I believe is at Penn State, he was a first-round talent that they picked up early in the second round, and he has got a lot of potential to turn into an absolute star. Obviously, at the end of last season, we saw, and the season before even, we saw a bit from Efe Obada, who obviously, for us as Brit, it's great to see an English guy go out and make something of himself in the league. At the edge rusher there, they don't have an awful lot. So you've got players like Efe Obada who are going to have a real opportunity to play their way into a starting gig. And, I mean, you've seen it before with players like that who are basically there and they're on prove-it deals. There's no capital in Efe Obada. If he wants to keep a job, he has to be productive. And it would not surprise me if you don't see someone like Efe Obada come out and have a 7 or 8 sack season, which for the kind of capital and the money they're spending on him would be great for him and for the Carolina Panthers. So I completely agree with Matt. I think their secondary and their defense will get better as the season goes on. But I think their offense is good enough that can keep them in enough games that come December, they could very well be in the hunt for a playoff berth.
I think the other big thing on that defense, obviously, Luke Kuechly retiring, stepping away. Yeah. You're going to have an adjustment period at the start of the season where it's not just young guys, it's young guys where you're going to need some leaders to step up, because I think Luke Kuechly is practically having your coach on the field. I think someone's got to step up and fill that void when they're out there. So I think there's just a few bits to watch, is why I think, the first half of the season, I think for me personally, is what's going to stop them getting into January. But I think they'll be there where they're in the hunt, that they can look back on it and think, we turn a couple of those early season games and we're there. So I think this time next season, we could have a very interesting conversation, and it's going to be a very, very, already is, but even more potentially stacked division.
Yeah, for sure. And Sam, you mentioned DJ Moore there as well, and I'd like to turn things onto the fantasy side of things. Whereabouts would you be looking to draft him in a fantasy draft?
Personally, I think I'd be considering him if I'm sat at the back end of the second, in the third round, for me, I would take him, depending on how everything else has fallen, I would take him from any point on then. I think he could really be a top tier wide receiver. Now, so whatever I wouldn't take him in the first, and if I'm at the start of the second, I probably wouldn't take him. But if I'm sat at the back of the second, or I'm early third, and I've already got 2 running backs, and all the other top guys are off the board, I think I'd put him in that kind of next category down of he could be a top 5 wide receiver at the end of this season.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I think the way I'm kind of viewing my draft of him is there is guys for me ahead of him, and on ADP and most sort of types of league, that are ahead of him. But I think that's purely because there's just less risk. Because we're looking at this of him having a breakout to be one of the fantasy guys at the position, who's saying sort of top 5, which I think he 100% can do, and I won't be surprised if he does. But there's sort of no guarantee, and you are relying on him taking that step. So that's why I think there's people going first. So I think, as Sam said, anywhere from sort of back of the second, if you go wide receiver heavy, through the third, anywhere there, if he's there, by all means take him. I think, yes, so it's sort of said, start of the second, there's other guys I think are slightly less risk. But over the course of the season, I wouldn't be shocked if they turn out to be less effective picks.
If you are also in a league where people don't know fantasy as well, which especially to anyone in our UK audience, I mean, I've had this over the last 2 or 3 years where I've played in fantasy leagues with 12 guys in there, and 6 people know the league well enough to how to draft properly, and the other 6 will just draft big names. They won't take the values at the right spot. If you can if you can pick DJ Moore up in, say, the 5th round, that is an absolute steal. So anywhere from the 4th onwards, I'm really happy to be taking him there.
I think if you're in a league and he's there in the 4th or 5th, you can pretty much lock the league up if you draft him competently. Because I do understand what you mean. Like, if
really
he's there
does
anywhere
happen.
Onwards, you get it
these
sometimes
leagues
where
do
people
exist.
panic draft. You're seeing it at the moment where you've got consistently 2 quarterbacks, 2 tight ends going 2nd, sometimes 3rd rounds. That people panic and draft off of that, and you could find it where potentially, back of the 3rd, start of the 4th, players like DJ Moore are sat there.
Yeah.
And I said, don't get caught up in what other people are doing in your draft. If there's someone like DJ Moore there, that's slightly lesser name you could break out. I mean, happy days.
Take him. Definitely take him.
I'm actually kind of interested now that we're talking about the fantasy. It's just kind of popped into my mind. I've got the roster ahead of me, and I've got, obviously you've got Christian McCaffrey there, and the website we're using for the roster has got Christian McCaffrey at like 99 overall. He's brilliant. Everyone's taking him number 1 overall after the last couple of years. But where do you guys have Teddy Bridgewater kind of ranked compared to other quarterbacks going? Because he's a bit of an unknown going into this year with a new team, not played a full 16 games in God knows how long.
Yeah,
Where would you be taking him?
He is. It's the unknown that worries me with that. And especially in my mocks, I think I haven't really been seeing him I haven't really seen him going off the board. And that's in sort of 12-man leagues where most people are just taking the one quarterback. It's rare that I've been seeing him going. I think I wouldn't be... he's sort of just around it on the ADP where some people will be taking him late on. Kind of like we said, Jared Goff in the 12th round. He'll be there at that sort of point anywhere around the 10th, 11th, 12th. And in some leagues, he'll make it all the way through to the end. Some people just streaming him. I think the thing that worries me is, as I said, it's going to take a while for things to click, I think. And necessarily, I think he could be a very efficient and serviceable quarterback in terms of just the organisation as a whole on the season. But in fantasy, where he's not going to be driving the ball down the field as much and potentially using some things if it still is a heavy CMC offense, I'm slightly concerned if you're going to get burnt a bit, why I think maybe streaming him is better. And you need to see, can he play 16 games? Because if you draft a quarterback, you're hoping he plays 16, and the only time you need to stream is your bye week.
No, that's a very good point.
I definitely think the same as well. Definitely a stream option. And just look at the number of games he's played over the last few years. I mean, he's only played in 16 of the last 3 years. So, you know, the numbers aren't quite there for me to be convinced to actually pick him up in a draft. So I would also be looking to stream him. I don't think many people would be picking him up even later on.
I think there is one of those picks where he's not being valued, where if you haven't taken a quarterback and it's sort of you've been taking talent through to maybe even like the 13th, where sometimes you'll be going maybe defense kicker in 14th, 15th, and you pick him up in the 13th, there is a very late pick, so potentially there's not a massive amount to lose off of that. I just personally wouldn't, but I can understand if you like him and you think he's a guy and you want to take the risk of the injuries, by all means.
Okay.
Look at him, he's ready. Look at him.
It's fired up.
With the news that we've had in the last couple of days,
what news?
The Cam Newton to the Patriots. Teddy Bridgewater is out and out locked in the starter for as long as he stays healthy. I can't see a world in which Will Greer, as the backup, challenges Teddy Bridgewater to be the starter for the Carolina Panthers.
Yeah.
I would argue that the Carolina Panthers have much better offensive weapons than the New England Patriots.
Right.
Cam Newton is on a 1-year prove-it deal. I think me and Matt were talking about this earlier when we were on the golf course. $550,000 guaranteed. There's a very real possibility that if Cam Newton shows up to training camp, doesn't actually look that good, his shoulder isn't looking healthy, that he gets cut for cap reasons because the New England Patriots have got no money to spend at the moment. So say you're drafting anywhere in July before we get to training camps, would you rather draft Teddy Bridgewater and take the surefire starter, or are you going for the upside and potential boom of Cam Newton?
I think there's one key thing that I will play this off, and that's Cam Newton's the bigger name. A lot of people who aren't necessarily experienced in their league, so if you're playing sort of the free, just normal fantasy leagues for a bit of fun, not the money leagues where it's a bit more serious, there's going to be a lot of people that just see, oh, Cam Newton, oh, Patriots, and they draft him higher. I think his ADP is going to be inflated just off of pure the names that are involved over Teddy Bridgewater on the Panthers. And I think it's a similar thing, although Bridgewater's had his injury history. I mean, Cam, you look at him last season, if he's getting bothered by injuries, it really affects his game. So I actually think here, I mean, I wouldn't really want to be taking either, but if I had to pick, it would be Bridgewater for me. I know there is the upside of Cam Newton, and the running game sets a good base. I don't know. There's just something I'm not as ecstatic or as a lot of people are quite enamored by. It's like, oh my god, it's Cam Newton on the Patriots. For me, I'm in a fantasy sense, not as fussed.
Yeah, I see the point, and I do agree that neither of them really would be on my radar. I personally would pick up Cam Newton over Teddy Bridgewater. I do feel like he will get picked up earlier than he should do in a draft. But I mean, you've got to go with the MVP, right? Like, he's done it before. If he can stay healthy, then I think the talent is there. And if anyone's going to get the best out of him, it will be Bill Belichick and that Patriots backroom staff, you know. So for me, Cam Newton. But yeah, he will get drafted a bit earlier than I probably would like to pick him up.
I think the big thing of that is Cam Newton. It's the higher ceiling pick.
Yeah.
But it's I think the more boom or bust is the way I'd look at it.
I mean, I must admit, I think I've got to agree with James on this one. I'd rather, for where I'd probably be able to pick up Bridgewater, like you're saying, I'd rather pick up a Daniel Jones as kind of like my... I seem to say this a lot. Guys, draft Daniel Jones.
He's the guy.
But I'd rather pick up Daniel Jones in the 11th or 12th and then take a flyer on a bench spot for Cam Newton, because personally, I just think Cam Newton is going to fit so well into that New England system. The way in which Cam Newton is really good at the line of scrimmage, and for a long time he wasn't necessarily allowed to do that in Carolina. But that Patriots offense, he is going to be given the ability to make checks and make changes at the line of scrimmage, which I think you're going to see his game completely change. And when you work in the fact that Josh McDaniels has shown in the past, when Jacoby Brissett started for them in a couple of games in 2016, he can integrate a quarterback with some designed run plays. I think suddenly that completely opens up that offense, and you could see Cam Newton, if he starts 16 games, I think you could see him be a potential comeback player of the year candidate, 30 plus touchdowns, 300 or 400 rushing yards, which that's where I think you get the edge over Bridgewater, because I think Cam's got the rushing potential, which Bridgewater as a more pro-style quarterback doesn't necessarily have. So I would take the flyer on the upside as my kind of a guy that I'm carrying on my bench for if he pops off.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I think that sums up well of what his ceiling is. If Cam comes out and is MVP Cam Newton, then it is the obvious choice. But I think it's that one. I think is a very much a personal preference kind of thing. It's how you want to play fantasy, and it's weighing up. It's hard to know where Cam's going to be going yet. I haven't done too many mocks with him since he's on the Patriots. Things updated, but I would imagine it's going to be the 9 in a 12-man league. I'd imagine it's around the 9-10 range for me. So in that way, even a little bit ahead. And for me, in the 9th, there's going to be better value when I know there's other guys later on.
Daniel Jones.
I have to mute that, Mike.
Daniel Jones.
I mean, ultimately, just to conclude on that point, I think if I'm picking up either of those, I've already drafted a quarterback before. And I don't tend to do that anyway. I tend to pick up one only, but if I was to pick either of those up, it would be a QB2.
Yeah.
However, I believe that is all the time we have got for today. So be sure to check us out on YouTube. Go like, comment, and subscribe. Head over to the Instagram. We're at the Brit Iron, and it's the same for Twitter as well. I'm also setting up a listener league. We put up a couple of posts on both Instagram and Twitter with more details, and we're looking to get a draw going for the end of July. So go register your interest and go get involved. But yeah, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time. See ya.